Hello everyone, welcome to this week's staff picks. My name is Kim Christopher. I'm a reference librarian for the Haverford Township Free Library, and just as usual with this video series, I am here to share with you some reading recommendations. Today, here I have First Principles, What America's Founders Learned from the Greeks and Romans and How That Shaped Our Country by Thomas E. Ricks. And title pretty much implies what the book is about, where it's this very detailed analysis of the founding fathers and their education, in this case the thoughts and history of the Greeks and Romans, as well as some more modern ones, that influenced their crafting of the Constitution and the laws of our country, and how that has guided our leadership and politics over the years since this country's founding. And Ricks, he really shows just how our country went from this very classical style of thought to a more modern one that we know now. And he had written this book as a reaction to all the political uproar in recent years in the presidential elections, to sort of try and help us readers understand how it came to be as is in terms of politics in our country. And as a result, it's a fascinating read to learn about the education of our founding fathers. I learned that Washington may not have had an education at all, other than learning to write his name down on a piece of paper, per se. But while it's fascinating to read for that purpose alone and to understand our political situation, what makes this a great read, and why I would highly recommend reading this book, is Rick's writing style. It's hard to describe exactly in words, but it's written in such a manner that it feels like when you're reading it, instead of it being this nonfiction story, nonfiction book, it's almost as if he's telling this grand epic tale like the Odyssey or Iliad, and you forget. It feels more like you're reading fiction instead of nonfiction. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend reading First Principles just because of Rick's writing style. Again, it's very difficult to put exactly into words, just what he does, how he does it, to make it such an engrossing book to read. But yeah, I would highly recommend it just because of the writing style. And then, moving along here, today I also have, as a second recommendation, Fire Logic by Lori J. Marks. And this is a fantasy book in a series of fantasy books where it's set in the land of Shaftal, where the four elements of fire, water, earth, and air, they maintain the balance and peace between the land and the people, and unfortunately this peace is dependent on the ruler of the country at the time. And in the case of Fire Logic, at the start of the story, the ruler Shaftal dies and leaves no heir in their place, which leaves the country open to invasion by the hostile Cyanites. And in the midst of the ensuing chaos, where the country is shattered, people scattered everywhere across the country, and the Cyanites ravaging and pillaging the landscape, three seemingly unrelated individuals, they hold the keys to saving all of Shaftal, as well as perhaps the world, by uniting the people through the four elements. And while it's a fantasy story as a result of, being set in an alternate world and the elements, magic, and all those sorts of things you would find in a fantasy story, what makes this a really great read, and why I would highly recommend reading Fire Logic as well as the others in the series, is that this is a character-driven narrative where Marx, she focuses on the interpersonal relationships of the characters in the stories and their growth over time as individuals. It is just a really great story as a result of just focusing on the characters. There's no time spent trying to go and dive into the complex magic of Shaftal and the world of the Fire Logic story, the logic stories. But yeah, I would highly recommend reading Fire Logic as well as the others again in this series, just for the characters. And then finally today, for my last recommendation, I have Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead by Haro Aso and Kotaro Takata. And title says it all. It's a zombie apocalypse manga series where the main character, Akira Tendo, at the start of things before the zombie apocalypse, he's the new guy in the job in a cushy office position, and he enthusiastically and energetically, does his job, but then over time he finds out that his job has a very dark side to it. Everyone in the office is overworked. There's no time off, sick leave, vacation, no compensation. All the bosses are corrupt. The list goes on and on and on as to what's wrong with the job. And over time, Mercury, he just becomes this sort of lifeless husk of his former energetic self. And just when everything seems lost, literally you see him on the verge of just like committing suicide, the zombie apocalypse occurs. But instead of panicking and running for his life in the face of these undead creatures that are trying to eat his flesh, Akira celebrates because he no longer has to go to work. But yeah, Zom 100, it's a really wonderful sort of different take on the zombie genre where instead of being very dark and depressing, even though it still has, all the zombies in it, blood, gore, eating flesh and everything, it's a very lighthearted comedic take on things, which I would highly recommend for fans of The Walking Dead and zombie stories, where again, it's a different spin on things, where the characters, Akira Tendo in particular, they always maintain a very bright outlook on things. They don't lose hope. They keep pushing onwards. They celebrate life. It is a fun, comedic manga series to read compared to others. Nothing wrong with The Walking Dead. Really excellent zombie series. But yeah, this is a very different, lighthearted take on the zombie genre that makes it a really wonderful manga series to read. So yeah, I would highly recommend this for fans of The Walking Dead, particularly if you want something new, but something that still stays within the lines of, being what a zombie story should be. And that's all I have for reading recommendations today, and until we see each other again, I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and please do take care.